History often paints its royal figures in broad strokes: the powerful monarch, the tragic hero, the scandalous rogue. We see the crown, the ceremony, the pronouncements that shape nations. But what of the individuals who inhabit these gilded roles? The human hearts beating beneath the ermine and the jewels? What of the lives that unfold not in the blaze of political glory, but in the quiet shadows of dynastic expectation and personal sorrow? Today we turn our gaze to just such a life, that of Princess Marie Louise, a granddaughter of the formidable Queen Victoria. Her story is not one of earth-shattering political intrigue or dramatic military campaigns. Instead, it is a deeply human narrative of love found and lost, of public humiliation endured with unwavering grace, and of a life ultimately defined not by its tragedies, but by a steadfast commitment to service and a remarkable resilience of spirit. Join us as we uncover the often overlooked journey of Princess Marie Louise, a woman whose royal birthright placed her at the center of European aristocracy, but whose personal trials forged in her a quiet strength that continues to resonate. Born in the late summer of 1872, Princess Marie Louise, or Louis, as she was known to her close-knit family, entered a world meticulously ordered by tradition and the long shadow of her formidable grandmother, Queen Victoria. As the daughter of Prince Christian of Schleswig-Holstein and Princess Helena, Victoria's fifth child, Louis's lineage connected her directly to the heart of the British monarchy. Her father, a German prince who had made his life in England, brought a continental sensibility to their family life, while her mother instilled in her the Victorian values of duty, piety, and philanthropic endeavor. Let's pause on her parents for a moment, because they are key to understanding the woman Louis would become. Her mother, Princess Helena, known in the family as Lenchen, was perhaps the most practical and down-to-earth of Victoria's daughters. She wasn't celebrated for her beauty, like her sisters, but for her sharp mind, her unwavering sense of responsibility, and her complete lack of airs. She was a pioneer in her own right, a fierce advocate for nursing education at a time when it was not considered a respectable profession, and one of the founding members of the British Red Cross. This wasn't a hobby for her. It was a vocation. She taught her daughters that their rank was not a privilege to be enjoyed, but a tool to be used for the betterment of others. Louis absorbed this lesson into her very being. Her father, Prince Christian, was a quiet, dignified man with a complex past. He hailed from the disputed duchies of Schleswig-Holstein, a territory that had been a political flashpoint in Europe. He had found himself on the losing side of a war against the rising power of Prussia, and in a sense, he was a prince without a domain. Queen Victoria offered him a new home in England through his marriage to Helena. He was a calming, steadying presence, a devoted husband and father who preferred the quiet life of a country gentleman and a senior army officer to the intrigues of the court. Theirs was not a grand, passionate romance, but it was a solid and deeply respectful partnership, and it gave their children the invaluable gift of a stable, loving home. Louis's childhood was spent largely at Cumberland Lodge in Windsor Great Park, a more secluded setting than the bustling palaces of London. Cumberland Lodge wasn't a palace in the traditional sense. You have to imagine a large, rambling brick mansion, parts of it dating back to the 17th century, surrounded by ancient oaks and vast open parkland where deer roamed freely. It was a place where mud on your boots was more common than polished marble floors. Here, alongside her elder sister, Princess Helena Victoria, or Thora, she experienced a relatively unostentatious upbringing, shielded somewhat from the intense public scrutiny faced by those closer to the direct line of succession. This environment allowed her artistic and sensitive nature to blossom. She developed a deep love for nature, for music, and for the quiet, contemplative pursuits that would sustain her throughout her life. Yet they were undeniably royal, their days filled with lessons in languages, history, and the intricate protocols of court. And the gravitational pull of their grandmother was never far away. They were frequent visitors to Osborne House on the Isle of Wight and Balmoral Castle in the Scottish Highlands, absorbing the formidable presence and the enduring principles of their grandmother, the Queen Empress. These visits were ritualistic, a core part of their education. Living so close to Windsor Castle meant that, unlike many of their more distant cousins, Louis and Thora had a uniquely frequent and almost domestic relationship with the monarch. Queen Victoria could be a terrifying figure, but she held a deep affection for her daughter Helena's family. She saw in them a reflection of her own cherished values, a lack of frivolity, a commitment to duty, and a deep-seated piety. This approval from the matriarch of Europe was a powerful shaping force in Louis's young life. The late 19th century was an era of both immense stability and subtle, yet significant shifts within the European monarchies. The intricate web of royal marriages, largely orchestrated by Queen Victoria, aimed to foster peace and stability across the continent. Louis's own family was a testament to this interconnectedness, a blend of British and German heritage. This dual identity, while perhaps seemingly harmonious in her youth, would later become a source of considerable personal complexity as the political landscape of Europe shifted dramatically. And this dual identity was far more complex than it sounds. It wasn't just a simple mix of English and German. Her father, Prince Christian, came from a territory that had been absorbed into the ever-expanding German Empire, dominated by Prussia. Her first cousin, meanwhile, was the ambitious and often erratic Kaiser Wilhelm II, the ruler of that very empire. So her German heritage was tied to both the old, displaced aristocracy and the new, aggressive imperial power. This placed her family in a delicate position, a balancing act that grew more precarious with each passing year, and a tension that would ultimately explode with the outbreak of the First World War. However, within the seemingly rigid structure of royal life, Louis's parents fostered a warm and intellectually stimulating environment. Princess Helena, a tireless advocate for nursing and charitable causes, instilled in her daughters the importance of using their privileged position to benefit society. This early exposure to the value of service would prove to be a defining characteristic of Louis's adult life. Prince Christian, though less prominent in the public eye, provided a stable and supportive home life, encouraging his daughter's interests in art and culture. Within this bubble of security, the bond between Louis and her sister Thora deepened into something extraordinary. They were more than sisters. They were two halves of a whole, an inseparable unit who would navigate the rest of their lives together. Louis was the more introspective and artistic of the two, while Thora was perhaps more outgoing, but their devotion to one another was absolute. This foundation of familial love and a strong sense of duty would be crucial in navigating the turbulent waters that lay ahead for the young princess. While the grand machinery of dynastic marriage loomed on the horizon, Louis's early years were marked by a sense of security and the quiet rhythms of a loving family, a sanctuary that would be abruptly shattered by the dictates of royal alliance. As Princess Marie Louise entered young adulthood, the unspoken yet ever-present expectation of a suitable marriage began to materialize. For a princess in the late Victorian era, this was not a question of if, but when and who. In the intricate chess game of European royal politics, where every move was calculated for dynastic advantage, Alliances were cemented through carefully arranged unions. It was her cousin, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, Queen Victoria's grandson, and a figure of considerable ambition and often volatile temperament, who took it upon himself to orchestrate Louis's marital prospects. You have to understand the Kaiser's mindset. He was a man driven by a deep-seated insecurity and a burning desire for Germany to take its place in the sun. He had a deeply complicated love-hate relationship with his English relatives and the British Empire. On one hand, he admired its global reach. On the other, he resented its dominance. Arranging a marriage for his English cousin was a way for him to exert influence, to weave another thread into the tapestry of European royalty that he could potentially pull. It was a minor move on the grand chessboard, but for Wilhelm, no move was insignificant. This wasn't just about grand strategy. It was also about power dynamics within the family. By successfully arranging a match for Queen Victoria's granddaughter, he was demonstrating his own standing as a major European player, a patriarch in his own right, capable of shaping the destinies of other, lesser, princely houses. Wilhelm, eager to solidify ties between the British and German royal houses, proposed Prince Aribert of Anhalt as a suitable match for his English cousin. Aribert was the fourth son of the reigning Duke of Anhalt, a relatively minor German principality nestled in what is now central Germany. From a purely dynastic perspective, the match seemed acceptable. Anhalt was a loyal state within Wilhelm's German Empire. The marriage would align two Protestant royal families and offer the promise of strengthening familial bonds across the North Sea. For Louis, a princess without a direct claim to a major throne, it offered the prospect of becoming the consort in a reigning house, a position of status and purpose. On paper, Prince Aribert himself looked the part. He was a tall, handsome man with a military bearing, known to be charming in social situations. He moved with the easy confidence of a man born to privilege. To an 18-year-old girl raised in the sheltered environment of Windsor, he might have appeared at first glance to be the very image of a fairy tale prince. However, beneath the veneer of dynastic suitability lay a hidden and ultimately devastating truth. The arrangement was made with a chilling disregard for the personal compatibility or even the basic happiness of the individuals involved. While the official pronouncements celebrated the impending union, whispers circulated within the more discreet circles of European aristocracy concerning Prince Aribert's personal inclinations. Rumors of his homosexuality, though never publicly acknowledged or discussed openly in the intensely homophobic climate of the time, persisted. In an era where such an orientation was not just a social taboo, but a criminal offense under paragraph 175 of the German Criminal Code, these were dangerous secrets. Whether these whispers reached Princess Marie Louise or her family prior to the engagement remains a matter of speculation. It is plausible that in the high-stakes game of royal matchmaking, such sensitive information was either deliberately overlooked, dismissed as unfounded gossip, or, perhaps most cynically, deemed secondary to the perceived political advantages of the alliance. For the Kaiser, securing the match may have been the primary, and perhaps only consideration. We must also understand the powerful code of silence that governed these circles. There was a vast difference between what was known and what was acknowledged. It is entirely possible that figures at court were aware of the rumors, but subscribed to a dangerous fiction, that a suitable marriage would somehow correct the prince's inclinations, or at the very least, provide a respectable facade behind which he could continue his private life discreetly. The bride in this cruel equation was simply a necessary component of that facade. The engagement was formally announced, and preparations commenced for a grand royal wedding. Marie Louise journeyed to Germany to be formally introduced to her future family and the court of Anhalt. Imagine the pressure on this young woman, barely out of her teens. She was leaving the familiar comfort of her home and the English language for a new country, a new family, and a new set of rigid expectations. Kaiser Wilhelm II, seemingly pleased with his role as matchmaker, bestowed considerable attention upon his cousin. But even amidst the celebrations, there were unsettling undertones. The German court was notoriously more rigid and militaristic than the British one. The atmosphere was one of stiff formality, a world away from the relative warmth of Cumberland Lodge. The conversations were in a language that, while familiar to her, was not her own. She was constantly on display, her every gesture and word scrutinized by her future in-laws, and a court eager to take the measure of their new princess. It must have been a profoundly isolating experience. Queen Victoria, while undoubtedly hoping for her granddaughter's happiness, expressed her anxieties in her private journals. A grandmother's worry for a cherished girl, embarking on a new life in a foreign court. She knew better than anyone the potential pitfalls of these arranged marriages, having seen them play out across the continent with her own children and grandchildren, sometimes with happy results and sometimes with disastrous ones. Her consent was a political necessity, but her personal feelings were likely tinged with a deep sense of foreboding. She had met Prince Aribert and had found him pleasant enough, but a sovereign's intuition, honed over decades of judging character, may have sensed something amiss. The wedding took place on July 6, 1891, in the familiar grandeur of St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle. It was a spectacle of royal pageantry, a perfect public display designed to signal stability and unity. The bride in white satin, adorned with family jewels, the groom a handsome German prince in full military regalia. As Princess Marie Louise walked down the aisle, the weight of history was all around her. This was the same chapel where generations of monarchs had worshipped, married, and been laid to rest. She was surrounded by the titans of European royalty, including the Prince of Wales, the future Edward VII. The music of the organ filled the vaulted space, and the summer light streamed through the stained glass windows. In her bouquet, as was tradition for Victoria's descendants, was a sprig of myrtle grown from a bush planted by the Queen herself, a symbol of love and happy marriage. What a bitter irony that symbol would become. For the cheering crowds outside and the guests within, this was the culmination of a royal romance. But for the young woman at the center of it all, it was a step into the great unknown. Princess Marie Louise, just 18 years old, stood at the altar, her future seemingly mapped out before her. Her vows were a public declaration, a sacred promise made before her family, her queen, and her God. As she and her new husband rode in a carriage through the cheering crowds, she was fulfilling the destiny for which she had been raised. She departed for Germany as Her Serene Highness Princess Aribert of Anhalt, embarking on what was intended to be a new chapter in her royal life. Little could she have known that this chapter would soon turn into a harrowing tale of isolation, heartbreak, and a public humiliation that would forever alter the course of her destiny. The court of Anhalt, with its capital in the historic city of Dessau, presented a stark contrast to the more relaxed and familiar atmosphere of the British royal family. The ducal palaces, though grand in their own right, possessed a certain austerity, a rigid adherence to protocol that felt stifling to the young British princess. Life was governed by a strict and often tedious etiquette. Every day was a performance, and Louis, used to the relative freedom and intellectual warmth of her parents' home, found it utterly soul-crushing. Consider the transition she faced. She had come from Cumberland Lodge, a home filled with books, art, and lively conversation, where her mother's charitable work brought a constant stream of real-world concerns into their lives. In Dessau, the primary concerns were precedence at the dinner table, the correct form of a dress for a distant cousin, and the precise angle of a bow. The court was dominated by a military ethos, a reflection of the rising Prussian influence across Germany. Conversations were clipped and formal, focused on military matters and court gossip, a world away from the literary and artistic discussions she had cherished at home. But the formal atmosphere and the unfamiliar customs were merely superficial challenges compared to the profound and growing unhappiness within her marriage. From the outset, the union between Marie Louise and Herbert was devoid of the warmth, intimacy, and mutual affection that formed the bedrock of a successful partnership. The marriage was a cold, empty vessel. The hoped-for arrival of children, a crucial expectation for any royal marriage, particularly within a sovereign house, never materialized. While the lack of an heir would have undoubtedly placed considerable pressure and scrutiny upon the young couple, it was merely a symptom of a far deeper and more intractable issue. The whispered rumors that had preceded the marriage proved to be tragically true. Princess Marie Louise found herself married to a man who, due to his inherent sexual orientation, was incapable of fulfilling the traditional role of a husband. The emotional and physical distance between them grew into an unbridgeable chasm. Prince Herbert, it was reported, showed a clear preference for the company of his male aides-de-camp and was frequently absent, leaving his young wife utterly alone. Imagine the long, silent evenings in the vast, echoing rooms of the Dessau Palace. Her days were structured by official duties, but her nights were likely filled with a crushing solitude. She was a bride without a husband, a partner without a companion. One can only imagine the profound loneliness and isolation she must have endured, trapped in a foreign land, bound by a public vow to a man with whom she could share no true intimacy. In the intensely private and socially restrictive world of European royalty, she would have been unable to confide in anyone, forced to bear the burden of her unhappy reality in silence. The expectations of her position demanded a public facade of marital harmony, further compounding her personal distress. To complain would have been a scandal. To admit the truth of her situation was simply unthinkable. Her own mother-in-law, Princess Antoinette of Saxe-Altenburg, was a distant figure, and there was little warmth or sympathy to be found from the rest of the Anhalt family. They saw her simply as a component of a dynastic arrangement, and as long as she played her part publicly, her private suffering was of no concern to them. For 9 long years, Princess Marie Louise navigated this desolate landscape. She diligently performed her public duties as a Princess of Anhalt, attending official functions, supporting local charities, and maintaining the required outward appearance of a contented royal consort. She learned the language, she followed the protocol, she did everything that was asked of her. We can picture her cutting ribbons at the opening of a new hospital, her smile fixed, her German flawless. We can see her sitting through tedious military parades, a perfect, elegant figure next to a husband who was a stranger to her. But behind the closed doors of the ducal residences, the marriage remained a hollow charade, a constant source of unspoken pain and disillusionment. The exact details of their strained relationship remain shrouded in the discretion of history, but the fundamental incompatibility and the absence of any genuine connection are undeniable. Her letters home to her family in England were likely filled with carefully worded pleasantries, masking the deep unhappiness that lay beneath. She would write about the weather, about a piece of music she had heard, about a book she had read, anything to fill the page and avoid the terrible unspoken truth of her daily existence. Her only true solace was likely found in these letters, a fragile lifeline back to the world of warmth and love she had left behind. The breaking point, when it finally came, was not a gradual drifting apart or a mutual agreement to separate. It was a swift, brutal, and profoundly humiliating act of repudiation that would cast a long shadow over Marie Louise's life and send shock waves through the interconnected network of European royalty. Some reports suggest that the final crisis was precipitated by Prince Aribert being discovered in a compromising situation with another man. Whatever the immediate cause, his family decided to act, not with compassion, but with ruthless efficiency. Their primary goal was not to resolve a marital crisis, but to contain a family scandal and protect the reputation of the House of Anhalt, and Marie Louise was deemed a disposable part of that equation. In December 1900, Princess Marie Louise was undertaking an official visit to Canada, a far-flung dominion of the British Empire. She was representing the crown, fulfilling the very duties she had been raised to perform thousands of miles away from her estranged husband and his family. It was there, on foreign soil, that she received a telegram. The sender was not her husband, but her father-in-law, Frederick I, the Duke of Anhalt. The curt message contained a devastating pronouncement. He had unilaterally used his ducal authority as a sovereign ruler to annul her marriage. It was over. The sheer audacity and cruelty of this act are staggering. Her marriage was not dissolved through any legal or ecclesiastical process that would have afforded her a voice or representation. It was simply erased by the decree of her father-in-law, without her knowledge, consent, or even her presence. This was an archaic, almost medieval assertion of power. To be dismissed in such a public and absolute manner while fulfilling her royal duties on behalf of her own family was an act of profound personal and public humiliation. The official justification provided by the Duke of Anhalt was a thinly veiled and damaging accusation that Marie Louise had refused to fulfill her marital obligations, a falsehood designed to shift the blame and further tarnish her reputation. It was a cruel and cowardly way to dispose of an inconvenient English princess and cover up a family scandal. They had used her for 9 years to provide a respectable cover for their son, and when that cover was no longer tenable, they simply cast her aside. The emotional impact on Princess Marie Louise must have been immense. In her memoirs, she would later write of her utter amazement, horror, and indignation. Stranded far from home, stripped of her title and her marriage by a callous act of patriarchal power, she faced a future filled with uncertainty and the crushing weight of public scandal. Her immediate return to England was a journey undertaken in a state of profound shock and emotional turmoil. The long, cold voyage across the Atlantic must have been a nightmare, every day bringing her closer to a home she had left as a bride and was now returning to as a publicly rejected wife. She had left as a princess of a German ducal house. She returned as a woman publicly rejected, her life irrevocably altered by a cruel twist of fate. The question that hung in the air was, what would become of her now? Could she ever recover from such a devastating and public betrayal? The answer lay in the unwavering support of her own family and the formidable presence of her grandmother, Queen Victoria. Upon her return to England, Princess Marie Louise found herself enveloped in the unwavering support and fierce protectiveness of her own family. Imagine that cold, gray arrival back on English shores. She was no longer a naive 18-year-old bride, but a 28-year-old woman, publicly humiliated and privately heartbroken. But she was not returning to an uncertain fate. She was returning home. Queen Victoria then, in the final months of her long reign, was incensed by the treatment of her granddaughter. The insult was not just personal, it was an affront to the British crown. An act performed by a minor German duke against the granddaughter of the Queen Empress was a piece of insolence that could not be tolerated. She made her feelings unequivocally clear. "Poor dear Louis," she reportedly exclaimed, insisting that her granddaughter return immediately to her side. The Queen swiftly decreed that Marie Louise would revert to her previous style and title, Her Highness Princess Marie Louise of Schleswig-Holstein. This was more than a mere formality. It was a public statement of support, a clear rejection of the actions of the Duke of Anhalt, and a powerful signal to the other courts of Europe that Louis was under her grandmother's protection. The Anhalt family had made their move. Now the formidable matriarch of Europe was making hers. This familial embrace provided Louis with a much-needed sanctuary. Her parents and siblings, particularly her devoted sister Thora, rallied around her. The family closed ranks, creating a shield of love and loyalty against the storm of public gossip and speculation. But even within this cocoon of love, the scars ran deep. Deeply religious, Marie Louise considered her marriage vows to be a sacred and unbreakable commitment made before God. In her own mind, the annulment imposed upon her without her consent held no true validity. It was a man-made decree that could not erase a divine sacrament. This profound conviction led her to a significant and life-altering decision. She would never remarry. For the rest of her life, she would consider herself bound by the vows she had made in St. George's Chapel. This was not a decision born of bitterness or a lack of opportunity, but of a deep, unshakable principle. In an age where a woman's identity was so intrinsically linked to her husband, choosing to remain in her own eyes a wife without a husband was a quiet but radical act of self-definition. She was taking control of her own story, refusing to let the Duke of Anhalt's decree be the final word on her life or her soul. At the relatively young age of 28, Princess Marie Louise faced a future that differed dramatically from the conventional path expected of a royal woman. Without a husband or the prospect of children of her own, she could have easily retreated into a life of quiet seclusion, a figure of pity within the royal court. However, drawing upon the strong sense of duty instilled in her by her mother and grandmother, Louis chose a different path. She resolved to transform her personal tragedy into a life of public purpose. She would not be defined by what she had lost, but by what she could give. She threw herself into charitable work with remarkable energy and dedication, becoming one of the most actively engaged members of the British royal family. Her patronage extended to a vast array of organizations, with a particular focus on causes close to her heart: nursing, hospitals, and the welfare of women and children. She took a keen interest in the Princess Christian Nursing Home at Windsor, a project her mother had championed. Unlike some royal patrons who lent their names in a purely titular capacity, Marie Louise actively involved herself in the work of these organizations, serving on committees, attending meetings, and tirelessly raising funds. She was known for her meticulous attention to detail and her genuine interest. She would arrive at a committee meeting not just for a ceremonial appearance, but having read all the reports, ready with insightful questions. She would visit the wards of the hospital she supported, not for a fleeting photo opportunity, but to sit and talk with the patients and the nurses to understand their real needs. Her commitment was genuine and deeply felt, a tangible expression of her desire to find purpose and meaning in her life after the shattering of her personal dreams. She found in service a way to heal, a way to channel her compassion and intelligence into a force for good. Her closest companion and steadfast support during this new chapter was her sister, Princess Helena Victoria. Thora, who also remained unmarried, became Louis's inseparable partner. The two sisters, now living together, first at Schomburg House on Pall Mall, created a unique and dignified household. They were more than just siblings. They were a unit, a partnership forged in shared experience and mutual devotion. Their home became a hub for artists, musicians, and thinkers, a place of quiet culture and intellectual curiosity. Their shared life provided the mutual support and understanding that Louis's marriage had so cruelly lacked. Together, they were stronger. At court functions, they were not seen as two lonely spinsters, but as a formidable and respected duo. They created their own family, a quiet and dignified household built on loyalty and affection, proving that a woman's life could be rich and complete without a husband. Marie Louise's keen interest in the arts and crafts also found a significant outlet in her public life. She possessed a discerning eye and a deep appreciation for skilled craftsmanship. This passion played a pivotal role in the creation of one of the most beloved and enduring treasures of the British royal family, Queen Mary's doll's house. After the First World War, the idea was conceived to create a perfect miniature house as a gift for Queen Mary, one that would showcase the very best of British design and craftsmanship. It was more than just a toy. It was a symbol of national recovery, a miniature testament to the enduring quality and creativity of a nation scarred by war. Marie Louise was a driving force behind the project. She was its chief fundraiser, its project manager, and its creative visionary. She worked closely with the architect Sir Edwin Lutyens, and it was her tireless enthusiasm and vast network of contacts that brought the project to life. She personally corresponded with over 1,500 artists, authors, and craftsmen, persuading them to contribute miniature marvels. Think of the sheer persuasive power and organizational skill this required. She convinced Sir Arthur Conan Doyle to pen a tiny, brand-new Sherlock Holmes story for the library. She got Rudyard Kipling to contribute a miniature handwritten poem. The house had fully functional plumbing with running water, electric lighting, and even a wine cellar stocked with minuscule bottles of real vintage wine. The result was a masterpiece, a time capsule of an era, and a testament to her vision and dedication. It was, in many ways, the ultimate expression of her life's philosophy. From a simple idea, through meticulous work and collaboration, she created something of lasting beauty and joy for the nation. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 presented Princess Marie Louise with a new and profound opportunity to serve her country. But it also plunged her into a deep personal crisis. The conflict, which pitted Britain and its allies against Germany and the Central Powers, had a significant impact on the British royal family, forcing them to navigate complex loyalties and public sentiment. For Louis, the war was a source of deep personal pain. This wasn't an abstract political conflict. It was a civil war within her own family. It was a war against the country of her former husband and many of her relatives, including her first cousin, the Kaiser. Her own dual heritage, once a symbol of the interconnectedness of European royalty, was now a source of conflict and suspicion. Every British casualty was a tragedy for her adopted nation. Every German casualty was a potential loss within her extended family. She had to listen to news reports demonizing a people and a culture that were an intrinsic part of her own identity. The psychological toll of this internal division must have been immense. In 1917, as the war dragged on into its third bloody year, anti-German feeling in Britain reached a fever pitch. German Gotha bombers were conducting terrifying air raids over London, bringing the war home to civilians in a new and brutal way. The very sound of the German name Saxe-Coburg and Gotha became a source of public anger and resentment. King George V, a pragmatic and deeply patriotic man, recognized that the monarchy needed to align itself completely with the national mood. He made the momentous decision to change the family name to the quintessentially English Windsor. He then asked those relatives with German titles to relinquish them. For Marie Louise and her sister Thora, this was a moment of profound personal significance. They readily complied, shedding their of Schleswig-Holstein designation and becoming simply Her Highness Princess Marie Louise and Her Highness Princess Helena Victoria. This act demonstrated their unwavering loyalty to Britain and their commitment to the crown. It was a public declaration of where their allegiance lay, a necessary severing of the final ties to their German paternal heritage in order to fully embrace their British identity in a time of national crisis. However, Marie Louise's contribution to the war effort went far beyond symbolic gestures. True to her mother's legacy, she immediately immersed herself in practical work. She understood that in a time of such immense suffering, titles and ceremonies meant little. What mattered was action. Recognizing the immense need for medical care for wounded soldiers, she actively involved herself in establishing and running a nursing unit. More significantly, she dedicated herself to working in a hospital that she helped to found in the north of England. In a departure from the more traditional roles of royal women of her era, who might visit wards for carefully managed photo opportunities, Marie Louise trained as a nurse and worked tirelessly on the wards. The scene inside was a world away from the palace. This was not a clean, quiet, modern hospital. This was a wartime facility, likely a converted country house or school, overwhelmed with casualties from the horrific battles of the Somme and Passchendaele. The air would have been thick with the smell of antiseptic, sweat, and blood. The corridors would have echoed with the moans of men suffering from shell shock, gas poisoning, and catastrophic injuries. Into this world of pain and chaos stepped the 42-year-old granddaughter of Queen Victoria. She changed dressings on septic wounds. She assisted in grueling surgical procedures with limited anesthesia. She comforted the dying, and she wrote letters home for men who had lost their limbs or their sight. She witnessed firsthand the devastating human cost of the conflict, an experience that undoubtedly deepened her compassion and reinforced her commitment to nursing and health care. It was grueling, heartbreaking work, but she never shirked from it. This was not a performance for the public. It was a quiet, determined act of service, undertaken far from the London spotlight. For her, this work may have been a form of penance, a way to atone for the war being waged by her German relatives. But more than that, it was a profound act of self-definition. Her selfless service during the war earned her widespread respect and admiration from those who witnessed it. She was no longer solely defined by the tragedy of her failed marriage. She had emerged as a figure of strength, compassion, and unwavering dedication to the well-being of her nation. Her wartime efforts solidified her reputation as one of the hardest working and most genuinely committed members of the royal family. In the crucible of the Great War, she had been tested, and she had proven her mettle. The quiet, artistic princess had become a rock of support for those broken by the conflict. She had found her ultimate purpose, not as a consort in a German court, but as a servant to the British people in their hour of greatest need. As the decades unfolded, Princess Marie Louise became a cherished and respected figure within the British royal family, a living link to a rapidly changing past. The sheer scale of history she embodied is difficult to comprehend. She witnessed the reigns of 6 monarchs, from her formidable grandmother, Queen Victoria, through her cousins Edward VII and George V, the turbulent abdication crisis of Edward VIII, the steadfast leadership of George VI during World War II, and into the early years of her great niece, Elizabeth II. Her long life spanned a period of immense social, political, and technological transformation, and she navigated these changes with quiet dignity and unwavering grace. She went from a world of horse-drawn carriages and gaslight, a world where monarchs held immense personal power, to one of jet engines and television, where the very role of monarchy was being questioned and redefined. Imagine being present at Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee in 1897, a festival of imperial power, and then, 56 years later, watching the coronation of your great niece, Queen Elizabeth II, on a small black and white television screen. She was a bridge between these two completely different worlds. She became a keeper of memories, an elder stateswoman within the family who had known everyone and seen everything. In her later years, her presence was like having a living history book in the room. She was a treasured great-aunt to the future Queen Elizabeth II and Princess Margaret, who were reportedly fascinated by her stories of their formidable great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria. For them, Victoria was a stern, almost mythical figure from portraits and statues. But for Louis, she was simply Grandmama. She could tell them what Victoria's voice sounded like, what she was like in private moments, the specific way she would insist on reading and signing every single state paper herself. These were not grand historical pronouncements, but small, humanizing details that brought the past to life. She provided a connection not just to history, but to the family's own soul. Her presence at coronations, weddings, and funerals was a comforting symbol of continuity in a world that seemed to be constantly reinventing itself. Despite her active public life, Marie Louise's personal world remained somewhat solitary following the annulment of her marriage. Her sister Thora remained her closest confidant and companion until her death in 1948, a loss that undoubtedly deeply affected Louis. For nearly 50 years, they had been an inseparable unit, and Thora's passing left a void that could never be filled. You have to imagine the silence in their shared home at Fitzmaurice Place. For half a century, there had always been someone else there who understood everything without a word being said. The pain of their German past, the quiet satisfaction of their charitable work, the shared memories of a childhood at Windsor. Now that presence was gone. It was perhaps the deepest loss of her life since the end of her marriage. Yet she carried on with her duties, her resilience once again coming to the fore. Her continued work was, in a way, a tribute to the life they had built together, a promise to continue the service that had given them both so much purpose. She never publicly revisited the painful details of her marriage, maintaining a lifelong discretion befitting her royal upbringing. In 1956, shortly before her own passing at the age of 84, Princess Marie Louise decided to share her remarkable life story with the world. She published her memoirs, My Memories of 6 Reigns, offering a unique and insightful perspective on the inner workings of the royal family across a transformative period in history. For a royal of her generation, this was a remarkable step. It was a chance to finally define her own life on her own terms. The book provides a fascinating glimpse into the personalities and events that shaped her world, written with a warmth, wit, and a characteristic reserve. It's filled with charming anecdotes like Queen Victoria's surprise at seeing her first motor car, or the Kaiser's boyish enthusiasm for his fleet. While she addresses the subject of her marriage with a delicate but palpable sadness, calling it a terrible experience, the overall tone of her memoirs is one of resilience, gratitude, and a deep appreciation for the opportunities she had to serve her country and her community. It is the voice of a woman who has made her peace with the past, who has found contentment not in the life that was planned for her, but in the life that she built for herself. Princess Marie Louise passed away peacefully in her London home on December 8th, 1956. Her death marked the end of an era. The last of Queen Victoria's granddaughters to have been born and raised in the Victorian age was gone. Her funeral was attended by Queen Elizabeth II and other members of the royal family, a final tribute to a woman who had dedicated so much of her life to royal duty and public service. She was laid to rest in the royal burial ground at Frogmore, Windsor, close to the home where she grew up and near the mausoleum of her beloved grandmother. She had come full circle, returning to the place that had offered her sanctuary after her life was so cruelly upended. There, in the quiet English earth of Windsor Great Park, the princess who had endured so much found her final rest. The life of Princess Marie Louise is not a dramatic saga of political power or military conquest. Instead, it is a more intimate and perhaps more profound story of personal resilience in the face of adversity. Her experience serves as a poignant reminder of the human cost that can lie beneath the glittering surface of royal life, where personal happiness can sometimes be sacrificed on the altar of dynastic expediency. The public humiliation she endured following the annulment of her marriage could have easily defined and embittered her life. Yet, she chose a different path. Her unwavering commitment to service and her tireless dedication to charitable causes transformed her narrative from one of victimhood to one of quiet triumph. She exemplified the Victorian ideal of royal duty, not as a mere obligation, but as a genuine calling, a way to find purpose and meaning in a life unexpectedly altered by heartbreak. Her work with nursing organizations, hospitals, and the arts left a tangible and lasting impact, demonstrating the power of even a minor royal to effect positive change. She helped to redefine the role of a princess in the modern era, shifting the focus from dynastic marriage to public service. Perhaps her most enduring legacy lies in her personal strength and her unwavering dignity. She navigated a profound personal tragedy and a public scandal with a remarkable grace, never allowing bitterness to consume her. She honored her deeply held beliefs, even when they differed from societal norms, as evidenced by her decision never to remarry. Her life stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the capacity to find meaning and purpose even after experiencing profound loss. Princess Marie Louise may not be one of the most widely remembered figures in royal history, yet her story, when examined more closely, reveals a woman of remarkable character, quiet fortitude, and a deep and abiding commitment to serving others. Her life is a powerful reminder that true strength is not always found in grand pronouncements or dramatic actions, but often in the silent perseverance of a compassionate heart navigating the complexities of life with unwavering dignity. Her legacy is one of quiet strength, enduring grace, and a life that, despite its early sorrow, ultimately became a testament to the power of service and the resilience of the human spirit. She was a princess who found her true sovereignty not in a crown or a title, but in the quiet dominion over her own heart and her unwavering commitment to making the world a better place.